Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back for another card review video. And today we're going to talk about the two new cards, which is probably the 4.5% jackpot as well as the 1% jackpot. So they are both are going to be fusion partners, and that will be Edward followed by Alphonse, which is Edward's fusion partner. So we're going to go through the active skill, leader skill, as well as the team skill for both of these two cards. Right, starting off with Edward. Right here, he's Earth Machina for whatever reason. Right, because I don't watch the anime, so I'm not very familiar with this entire collab. Right, but let's talk about the leader skill first. Right, so when the team consists of only Machina and human, as what you can see here is pretty much very similar to the Miku 1% card as well. So team attack times 5.5. So if you remember Roy Mustang's multiplier, it is actually higher. Right, so we'll talk about this later. Team attack times 5.5, and 2 enchanted earth will be generated for every enchanted water, fire, earth dissolved in the first batch, and then 2 heart runes generated for every group of light, dark, or heart dissolved in the first batch. Alright, on top of that, earth possess 50% of other attribute, heart possess 50% of attribute rune stones. Alright, so you can see here you can pretty much play a multicolor team with no problem at all. Very similar to Miku as well. Right, and then last but not least, if earth and heart are dissolved in the same round, so this did not mention first batch, so as long as you dissolve this within that one turn of spinning, team attack times 1.4 additionally. Right, so overall you can see that this leader skill here, there's a lot of rune possession, there's a lot of auto rune generation in terms of sky drop, so you can expect this team here to have very consistent damage. Right, especially when you have heart runes possess effect of attributive rune stones, and then as well as earth possessing 50% of other attributive rune stones. So if you play a multicolor or multi-attribute team, the damage will be very consistent throughout every single card in the team. Right, unlike teams like Veronica and stuff like that doesn't have attributive rune stones possession of each other. Right, so let's move on to the next. Alright, so the next one we're going to talk about will be Edward's team skill. Alright, so this team skill applies when you have dual Edward, which is the non-fusion version. Alright, so I have to make this very clear because this card review is going to be very complicated and very long. Alright, so the team skill you see right here will be leader ally Edward with no fusion. Alright, so extend rune movement regardless by 3 seconds, so that's okay. That counters the 2-second movement time and stuff like that. Right, team HP recovery times 1.5 additionally. Right, so this team here will actually have a decent amount of HP. Right, I expect it to be around the 30,000 region. Right, so point number 3, attack and recovery of the first Edward and Alphonse, or the fusion form from the left 1.2 times additionally. Right, so that's always a good extra bonus right there. Right, so there's not much to talk about for the team skill here. So let's take a look at the active skill. Alright, so the active skill of Edward is pretty much like a Gon kind of Jajangmyeon kind of active skill, right? But Gon, actually, you have to spin from one of the 3 corners, right? Whereas for this Edward active skill is actually a picture of a sword, a heart, and a health kind of icon, right? So you tap on whatever effect that you want, right? So in this case, you can see HP, attack, and recovery. So all 3 are useful in their own situations. Right, so let's talk about the HP one first, right? So HP, damage received will not lead to your defeat, so you can use this to counter things like initial shield or things that have to, you know, kind of you have to take damage before launching an attack and stuff like that. Right, so that will actually save you for that 1 turn. For attack, the card attack times 9. And then there's a pros and cons for every alchemy active skill, right? So for the HP one, team attack and recovery minus becomes 0, so that doesn't matter because what you want to do is to kind of stall out the turn to at least not lead to your defeat kind of thing, right? So for attack, character attack times 9, so there's a boost there, and the cost will be damage received times 1.5 and team recovery minus 50%, right? So that doesn't really matter because if you activate attack in the first place, you are bound to you aim to dish out a tremendous amount of damage, right? And that is to kill off the enemy, right? So the costs don't really matter if you kill the enemy, right? That's what I'm saying. Okay, so for recovery of human and Machina times 3.5, right? In turn, team attack minus 50%. So this is actually quite useful if you are, let's say, for example, Chaos Ultimate Stage returns and stuff like that. You want to do that overheal shield, right? You want to surpass that overheal shield. You can use the recovery boost of 3.5, and that can possibly accelerate your overhealing process if you want to kind of bypass certain annoying stages like this. Alright, so this is some of the few situations you can consider or using Edward's active skill. Alright, so I'm gonna briefly touch on Alphonse right here, right? The active skill. I'll talk about the leader skill a bit later in the video, right? Because I'm gonna touch on the fusion version of Edward and Alphonse. So I'm gonna go through Alphonse active skill first. Right, so Alphonse here, active skill is at CD8, a rather long cooldown. So number 1, by tapping a runestones on the magical circle of element, which is what you see for like Ingzhen, for like Qitiandi and stuff like that, that kind of magic circle. Right, turn 18 runestones at fixed position into runestones of that type. And notice that you need to tap the element twice. So I believe the formation of that would be something like, if you tap water, fire, it's going to be water, fire, water, fire, water, fire, something like that. Right, by tapping it twice, right, you can see that there will be a change in active skill later. So for 1 round, damage received will not lead to your defeat. So this is a bit repetitive as compared to the Edward's active skill, one of his HP, the HP version of his active, right? And then number 3, the team will not be poisoned. So I find that this part here is a bit useless, because for 1 round, the team will not be poisoned for 1 round. Right, so this is actually, it might save you for certain stages, but I feel that for most of the time, 1 round is not enough, right, in terms of like the poison kind of stage. But anyways, this is going to be Alphonse's active skill, and this will get a pretty massive boost when you kind of see the fusion version. Right, so let's talk about that. So before I go on to that, I'm going to do a small, let you guys know for the combination part, right? Upon combination for Edward and Alphonse, you can actually fully recover your HP, which is good. Right? Sometimes you encounter stage like HP to suddenly your HP will drop to 1 with that spike debuff kind of thing, right? So you can combine and then fully recover your HP, right? So that works in certain scenarios. Right? Number 2, turn all runestones into enchanted runestones. So if you remember Roy Mustang's combination, it actually explodes the board, right? Whereas this combination right here only turns all runestones into enchanted runestones, right? So this somehow can get rid of certain board hazards, such as the mark runes, or basically mark runes and stuff like that, right? Or weathered runes will not be settled. Yeah, pretty much mark runes, right? So if take note that if the rune is already enchanted, right, by doing a fusion, right, the combination, the mark runes will still be there, right? So it's kind of like a partial board clear kind of thing, right? But just to kind of settle some of the situations a little bit, right? That's all I can say. Alright, so we have come to the fusion form of Edward and Alphonse, right? So upon fusion, it will become a fully Earth Machina card. So for the Roy Mustang, both are fire human, right? So upon fusion, it is naturally fire human. But here, Alphonse loses his light attribute and becomes Earth as well, right? So an Earth Machina team consists of only human and Machina, which is the same as what we see for Edward pre-fusion form. So now you can see that there is an increase in the multiplier. Just now was 5.5, and now upon fusion you get times 6. Right, so definitely fuse this card as soon as possible. Right, of course it depends on the situation as well, but I suggest fusing as soon as possible. Should the stage be suitable for fusion, right? So number 2 and number 3 is no difference. You can see that it's pretty much the same thing. Rune generation upon dissolving whatever runes in the first batch, right? I've touched on that earlier, so I will not go through that again. 2 and 3 is the same pre-fusion and post-fusion, right? So number 4 and 5 is the same as well, so I'm not going to touch on that. Rune possession for earth and heart runes. So number 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, 6. Number 6 point, if you take a look, if earth and heart are dissolved in the same round, you can see that there is an additional increase, right? Pre-fusion it was 1.4, and now the fusion form gives you 1.6, so there is an additional multiplier as well. Right, so you can see here point number 1 times from 5.5 to 6, and then point number 6 from 1.4 to 1.6 additionally, so there is actually a pretty decent amount of boost right there. So I'm going to quickly touch on the active skill for Edward and Alphonse. Right, so upon fusion you have 2 active skills. So this active skill, what you're seeing on the screen right now, would be the Edward active skill, right, for the fusion form. So basically the same thing, HP, attack, recovery, choose 3 options, choose 1. Right, so you can see it's pretty much the same, just that there are certain tweaks. For example, for the attack form, character attack times 10 instead of 9, and then for recovery of human and machina times 4.5 instead of 3.5, right? So that definitely increase the damage and recovery respectively. So use it to your advantage. So the second active skill belongs to Alphonse. So you can see that there is a change in the active skill as well. It's still CD8. In my opinion, I find that it is very long for such an active skill like this. I expect maybe a CD6 or CD7. But anyways, let's talk about the active skill. By tapping a runestones on the magic circle, this time 3 times instead of 2 times. So if you tap water, fire, earth, then it's going to be the bottom 3 rows generation. Water, fire, earth, water, fire, earth. Okay, so turn 18 runestones at fixed position, which is the bottom 3 rows as I mentioned. It's going to be the column convert, right? So you can kind of picture it. So for 1 round, team will not lead, the damage received will not lead to your defeat, and the team will not be poisoned. The last part, point number 2 and point number 3, basically remains the same, just that you have more rune generation for the point number 1, so that can actually help you to solve certain stuff such as quintet, elemental shield, and or maybe enchanted quintet, should you do a fusion to enchant the board, and then after that use Alphonse active skill, right, provided you have the 2 other elements on the top of the board. Alright, so this part here is where you really have to jot down your notes, because this is where the confusing part comes in. So this is Edward and Alphonse team skill. Should you play Edward, Alphonse, ally, Edward? Alright, so there is 2 different playstyle, and this is one of it. So this will be the fusion form with a Edward ally. Right, so let's take a look at the team skill. Extend rune movement time regardless by 4 seconds. So remembering what I mentioned earlier, if you have a Edward, ally Edward at the start of the battle, it is actually extend regardlessly by 3 seconds, so you have that 1 extra boost, 1 second extra. Point number 2, HP recovery times 1.5 additionally, right? So you can see that there is also a lot of criteria to fulfill, right? So you have to dissolve earth, you have to dissolve heart to get the extra boost, and then here you have an extra 1.5 additionally. So the higher the combo count, the higher Edward and Alphonse attack. So this, take note, this only applies to Edward and Alphonse instead of the entire team. Right, so the higher the combo count, to the max you get a 2.5 times boost for 8 combos. So in my opinion, 8 combo isn't very difficult to fulfill, because if you remember, we have the auto rune generation as sky drop for the leader skill. Right, so if you were to spin 6 combos or even 7 combos, it's definitely no problem to hit up to 8 combos constantly. Okay, so we're going to talk about point number 4, damage of Edward and Alphonse. Regardless, we'll go through regardless of enemy's defense, so that's very good, very much like Ingzhen, whereby there is a high defense like petrified runes and or generally high defense monster. This damage will just go straight through, right? Very, very useful in certain situations, and also regardless of combo shield, right? So it's unsure whether this is the normal combo shield or the initial combo shield, right? So I believe it's just the normal combo shield, because they did not mention anything initial, right? So combo shield, things like the above 10 combos, above 12 combos, above 20 combos and stuff like that, right? You'll be able to just go right through, right? So that is only for Edward and Alphonse, the fusion card, and it does not apply to the entire team. So point number 5, attack and recovery of Edward 1.2 additionally, so that's what we get usually. There's no change after we get the fusion, right? So basically you can see here, if you play the Edward play style, basically you're getting very high HP and recovery, right? So I expect this team will have about 30,000 HP around there, right? So very sustainable, right? So if you want to fight things like, for example, like the 10 seal and stuff like that, whereby you have an initial hit with 28,000 damage, right? So this team definitely will have enough HP to go through that, right? So I'll be moving on to talk about if you ally Alphonse and how the gameplay will kind of change from there onwards. Okay, so I've touched on Alphonse active skill just now, right? So now, should you play a Alphonse leader and an Alphonse ally, how would the gameplay be different in a sense? Right, so let's take a look at the leader skill. When team consists of only human and machina, same thing. Team attack times 5, so you can see there is actually a drop in the base multiplier, but never mind. Point number 2, for every group of runestones dissolve, X combo plus 1 to the max 12 X combo, and when X combo count is above 6, which means that you need to dissolve 6 groups of runes, right? Team attack times 2 additionally, so that's actually pretty good, times 2. Light possess 50%, heart possess 50%, and if light and heart dissolve in the same round, team attack times 1.4. Okay, so that's actually pretty decent. So what's the difference between the two playstyles? Right, so upon fusion, you'll get another Edward Alphonse playstyle, which is one fusion form as your leader and one Alphonse as your ally instead of Edward. Right, so what kind of change in the playstyle would be? As you can see here from the team skill, extend rune movement regardless by 4 seconds doesn't change. There's no difference in that. You get a team damage reduction, right? So instead of having that HP boost, HP and attack boost, you actually have a damage reduction now, right? So if you play Edward Alphonse with a Alphonse ally, you expect to have a lesser amount of HP, but you'll get that damage reduction, right? So it depends on the stage, the stage info itself. All right, so I'll touch on that later once I finish all that team skill. All right, so number 3, the higher the combo count, the higher the EX combo count, the higher Edward and Alphonse attack to the max times 4 for 10 extra combos, right? EX combo, and then the damage of Edward and Alphonse regardless of an enemy's defense, so there's no change, and then the change is regardless of initial shield. Right, so it also varies depending on the stage info, right? Whether we want to do a Alphonse ally or a Edward ally. So last but not least, we have that additional stat boost for attack and recovery times 1.2 additionally, so there's no change. So what you can see here, that for Edward and Alphonse, you want to go for Edward. I will go for Edward in my opinion, because it is more consistent, where you have that higher damage, you have that higher HP for that sustainability, and then also in terms of rune possession, Earth runes possess 100% of all the other attributes, and then Heart runes possess 100% of attributive rune stones, right? Whereas if you were to play a Edward and an Alphonse ally kind of thing, right? Notice that there will be a mix in terms of rune possession. There will not be 100% possession, right? So which means that you'll get Earth possess 50%, Light possess 50%, and then Heart 100%, right? You have more rune possession, but in order to get that full multiplier, every round you have to dissolve Light, Earth, as well as Heart runes, right? So you have to dissolve these 3 runes constantly in order to kind of rack up that damage, right? So you can see for Alphonse playstyle, it relies very much on combo, right? So if you have many bot hazards such as the tornado runes, the laser runes, the weathered runes, or whatever bot hazard, the burning runes, X cross burn, or the burning trails, for example, right? It is very unlikely you're gonna do very high combos, and that's gonna affect your total damage output, right? So whereas if you were to ally Edward, right, it is more consistent in terms of your total damage multiplier, right? So, but ultimately it also depends on the stage itself, as what I mentioned, right? So if you have an enemy that have initial shield, or basically the boss have initial shield and have very high damage and it ignores damage reduction, right? So that's a problem. So maybe Alphonse will solve the problem because it disregards initial shield, right? That's one thing to consider. And then, you know, if it's an enemy with very high combos, you might want to bring Edward as your ally instead, so you get that ignore combo shield kind of thing, right? So ultimately, it really depends on your playstyle, and it also depends on the stage, the enemy skills and all this, right? So overall, this is gonna be the card review for Edward as well as Alphonse. So correct me if I'm wrong. So I believe this is gonna be the one. Edward is definitely the 1%, and Alphonse is gonna be the other 4.5% jackpot, other than Roy Mustang. Alright, so if you guys feel that I have left out any important details, feel free to just comment it down below, right, to share with everybody watching my video. Right, so thank you so much for watching. It's been a very long card review, but hopefully it's going to be a very informative one as well. Right, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.